Hi again, Bean Bro subscribers. It's great to be back. This is the Coffee Collective here in Copenhagen, and we're super excited to bring to you two new coffees. One that you've tasted the last year and an all new exclusive just for Bean Bros. So come on in and I'll show you around. All right, so welcome to the roastery at Coffee Collective here in Copenhagen. This is the Loring, which we're roasting on, 35 kilo roaster. But come in the back, I'll show you where the green room is. So for those of you that have never seen behind the scenes of a coffee roaster, this is where all the greens are kept. Inside the room here, it's actually temperature controlled. So where we store most of our green coffee is actually in an underground cellar. In here, it's actually replicating that same temperature. It's around about 16 to 19 degrees Celsius. Now the first coffee that we have for the Bean Bro subscribers is actually an exclusive. It's not a coffee that we have yet released, and it's actually the first time we've bought this coffee as Coffee Collective. In saying that, it's coming from one of our trusted partners that we've been working with for the longest period of time, 11 years. It's Edwin Martinez, who runs a farm called Finca Vista Hermosa, which is in Guatemala. Now, the history with Guatemala is that up until around about 2016, it was forbidden to process natural processed coffees. So, for that matter, we've never had a natural processed coffee from Guatemala. This is the first time we've got it. The cup that we're actually going to get from this one here is going to be heavy and syrupy and sweet. What you're going to find, that particularly from the processing, is that it actually contributes a lot of these strong ripe strawberry aromas. It's going to be a very fruity cup, and they're going to have an insanely high sweetness. The next coffee that we have is, if you've been subscribing to Bean Bros for an extended period of time, it's a coffee that we've been buying at Coffee Collective for the last 3 years, and Bean Bros actually bought it last year and presented it to you as the subscribers. It's from a wet mill in Ethiopia called Alaka. It's a wash process coffee, and what we're finding is that this coffee is coming from an area that's quite nearby Yirgacheffe. Now, Yirgacheffe coffees, I'm sure many of you have tasted them before, but they're very floral, they're very citric, and they're very light and aromatic. Now, this coffee is very similar to that, but what we've found is that this one here has more depth and sweetness, and it doesn't have as much florals. It's got more of a fruity character. We just want to show you a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes when we're doing the roasting. First of all, we have the roasted coffee, of course, and to make it as consistent as possible and make sure that we're getting the most out of the cup, what the roasters will do is they'll take a sample of the coffee, they'll grind it up on this Malconic here, and then what they'll do is they'll put it into a color spectrum meter, which is called an Agtron meter, and they'll record what is the color spectrum on each batch. From there, they'll take it out to the cupping table, and that is where everything is analyzed in terms of taste, and then it will be decided whether it's going to be approved or the roast profile is going to be tweaked before we make the final adjustments and roasts. So I'll take you through now what it is that we do with the color spectrum reader. You could call this the same as maybe a brewer's refractometer. This is the roaster's tool for consistency. What they do is then they get it onto this here. They do a very similar distribution to your espresso. Now, excuse me because I'm a bit rusty on this. But what we're doing is we're trying to spread it out as much as possible so that we're getting an even coverage, so that there'll be no indentations on the surface. We take it across into this Agtron reader here, and then we simply slide it in. Now, this reading here, unfortunately, it can't be translated to all Agtron readings around the world. Otherwise, we could share information and really communicate with the community of roasters. This is very specific to the one here at Coffee Collective. But what happens is that we're able to log down every single batch so that when you, as the subscribers, are getting the coffee, every single batch should be as consistent as possible. So what I'm going to showcase now is the water that we use at the Coffee Collective to brew our filter coffees. You'll find here that what we're using a ppm, or a parts per million, of 36, which is showcasing how much mineral components are inside the water. Now, this is particularly low across the whole board. What we find is that through using this type of water, we're able to encapsulate a lot more aromas and a really high acidity, which is going to result in a much more pleasant tactile feeling in your mouth. When we're using the water at 36 ppm, it's got a very low bicarbonate content. And that's what we encourage you to look for when you're looking for the perfect water to brew with at home. If you look in the supermarket and you find bottles of water that showcase exactly what's inside the water, and you look for bicarbonate content, just find something that's relatively low. Usually we're around about 17 parts per million here at Coffee Collective. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to brew the cup of coffee. When we brew the coffee, we're using the Kalita Wave 155 dripper. The reason we use this particular brewer on all of our bars is that when we're brewing the coffees, it's the most consistent across the board. You're able to get a very consistent pour, and when there's multiple people brewing the coffees, it's going to restrict the flow of the water, and it's got a flat surface bottom, which allows for an even extraction the whole way through the coffee grinds. We also need to focus on the pour itself. We don't want it to be at any particular angle. In fact, we want it to be dropping down vertically on top of the coffee. The reason we want the vertical drop down is that is not going to cause any holes or channeling in the coffee itself. If you get channeling in your cup, the perfect thing you'll see at the end of it is that there's a hole in the dry grounds. That means that the water has able to pass through a particular area of that coffee very easily, and it's going to result in an over-extraction of one particular area of the coffee, which will translate to bitterness, and an under-extraction of another part of the coffee, which will translate to sourness. So you end up with a cup that is lacking sweetness, a little bit bitter and a little bit sour. It's not desirable, but it just means you need to practice a little bit more and get out your brewing equipment and keep trying. So, Bean Bros subscribers, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas and you enjoy brewing up the coffees. If you have any questions or you'd like to know more about the coffees, please write us an email or get in touch with the Bean Bros team and we'll be happy to help you out. Happy brewing.